Hi, everybody, and welcome to the September webinar on wireless risk and safer technology solutions, especially as they pertain to our schools. We hope that our co-host, Patty Wood, will be joining us, and when she does, we'll take a little bit of break and listen to the work that she has been doing through several amazing projects with Tech Safe Schools, the Baby Safe Project, and Americans for Responsible Technology. I suspect she's just hit a snag today, but we hope to see her soon. So with that, I am going to thank everybody for muting themselves. We sometimes get some stray background noises coming our way. And I will go ahead and do a screen share on my slides. And Shelley, can you give me a nod when that comes up on your end? Okay,
Yes, I
good.
can.
So
It's on
please
now.
know that all the information we're going to cover tonight we'll probably present for about an hour and a half, and then we'll open it up to Q&A at the end. We are recording this, so anybody who registered will be sending out the video, and we'll also send out my slides so that as you go down this journey, if there's new things that you're learning, you're more than welcome to just use that as your launch point into your own investigation. And we suggest to people, don't take our word on any of this. Go know it for yourself so that you really understand what wireless tech presents to us in terms of benefits and risks. And so we can make our own choices and maybe pull ourselves together in our communities to start protecting our collective children especially. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce myself. That MTPW after my name just means that I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University, where I also earned my undergraduate degree in communication studies. And I never, ever imagined this is where my skill set would lead me. But when you fall down this rabbit hole, you're grateful for whatever skills you can contribute to help others learn. So I fell down that proverbial rabbit hole about a decade ago. And I had spent many years bringing wireless technology into my children's schools at the time where the industry was heavily promoting their 21st century classroom. And I think their goal was to get a one-to-one device in the hands of every child. From a marketing strategy, wow, that's really awesome. Because once you have a child as a consumer, you often get to keep them for life. However, as we're going to learn today, there are far too many biological risks to continue irradiating our children in our classrooms and homes. So this was not an easy conversation to have with my schools because we'd only been taught all Wi-Fi all the time, innovation, hey, this is the way to go. But we're so grateful that today a lot of doctors, a lot of parents, and a lot of school administrators are recognizing that, yeah, we sort of got taken for a ride here. We are not having positive educational outcomes with tech in the classroom. We are not having positive social and emotional development, and we're having far too many distractions to the learning environment. So it's a great time to join this conversation or to further it from where you are, because there are great things happening that we can add to with our knowledge on wireless risks and best practices. So because we study the science, we could bring that forward. And my little school here in Ashland, Massachusetts, our district became the first in the US to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms with best practices for mobile devices. First of all, let's just turn it all off, especially when we're not even using it. Don't let it sit around pulsing radiation. Secondly, turn on the Wi-Fi, those wireless access points, the routers, only when we need them. Don't let those sit there pulsating us with microwave radiation. And always place these radiating devices away from the body on a solid surface, preferably not something that's metal, because one of the properties of man-made radiation is that it amplifies around metal. So you want to be mindful of that as well. So we became the first in the US to even have this little sign hanging in our schools, but it turns out it was just a sign. Our school administrators are still today waiting for higher authorities to tell them what to do. So I went and met with Senate President Karen Spilka in Massachusetts. She and I had worked together on our local education foundation, and we were the ones who were bringing in all this technology. So once I learned what I learned, I met with her and I showed her the science. I showed her Ashland's, little sign with our best practices. And then I was able to measure the radiation exposure from her device and her district director's laptop. And both devices went right off the charts with this intense amount of radiation that we're exposing our kids to. So she put me with an attorney in her office, Aaron Carty, in the Senate Ways and Means Committee at the time. And we crafted a very simple bill that would form a commission to bring the right minds together at the state level and see what we can see and figure out what we want to do about it. Well, I didn't understand the systems, but we move like molasses in Massachusetts. It's been 10 years since we've had bills, and yet I had the same conversation with State Representative Patrick Abrami in New Hampshire, and he and his constituent who got very sick from Wi-Fi drove down to my home here in Massachusetts, and we sat at my kitchen table for an afternoon. And we helped him to connect the dots. And he wrote a very good bill with 8 pointed questions that demand answers. And we'll walk you through that today too. So we have some really good things going, but it's not happening fast enough to protect our families today. Then Dr. Deborah Davis, who's a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate on climate change, she is also the founder of the Environmental Health Trust and president emeritus. She's still very active with that organization, but she stepped back from the day-to-day operations, which Theodora Scarato runs. And somebody in Europe contacted her and said, Dr. Davis, we know you have this incredible repository called the Environmental Health Trust, arguably the world's best database on this issue. Could we please reference that in a course that we're building? So Breton Lynn West connected with Dr. Davis, and she said, absolutely, because Breton Lynn had figured out we can't fix this problem until people know about it. And before we can do that, we've got to get the education out front. So Dr. Davis said, absolutely, reference the Environmental Health Trust, and you might want to speak to Cece Doucette in Massachusetts. She's made inroads with her schools and the legislature. And you might also want to speak to one of the leading scientists out of Finland, Dr. Mikko Ahonen. And so Mikko and Brett and Lynn and I hit it hard. We all had like this little miraculous 6-month period where we could open up our calendars and really build out a course online that can be completed in about an hour online for less than the cost of a movie ticket. And we do charge a little nominal fee because we still have overhead costs that we have to do for our website, our course engine, our legal fees, and all the other overhead that goes with running a nonprofit. So we do a nominal fee. We invite everybody to go out and take this little course. We've just relaunched it. And we have literally training off the shelf for your schools, for your town, for your workplace, for your family. And it kicks out a little tip sheet at the end that you can print out, as well as a certificate of compliance or completion if you have to hand it in to your training compliance office or your human resources office. So please know that 10 years ago, when I fell down the rabbit hole on this, we didn't have much of any of the resources that we're going to share with you today. So you're joining or continuing the conversation at a wonderful point in time because we have so much that we can just hit the ground running with today. So when we started introducing legislation here in Massachusetts, Dr. Davis brought a panel of world-leading experts to our State House to ask for right-to-know legislation, just like we ultimately did with tobacco, alcohol, pornography, gambling. Adults, drugs, adults will make their choices, but it's our moral obligation to protect our children. So I got to meet Dr. Davis in person at the State House, and she helped to get word out about this forum she was doing. And so I walked into a standing room only crowd that was so gratifying because I had been researching the heck out of this for 2 years on my own. So how wonderful to go into a room of legislators, doctors, scientists, captains of industry, all there to talk about wireless radiation risks, and more importantly, how to fix this problem that we've created. So as I connected with others through that program, we were able to launch Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And again, we're going to make my slides available. So please feel free to go out there and pound around and learn what you can learn and use anything we've already done as your launch point for investigation or for sharing with others. You know, we're big sharers. We believe in don't reinvent the wheel if there's already something out there that'll help you. Then somebody down at the National Institutes of Health found my work and asked if I would co-chair the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference down at the NIH. And so I was so honored, and I was grateful that joining our panel was Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. And with great thanks to our Canadian friends who are with us today, they are working with Canadians for Safe Technology. And Frank Clegg flew in on his own time and dime to teach us that industry can absolutely do better if given a nudge. So we're working on public policy, we're working on industry, and today we're working to help educate the public. We also had Dr. Martin Pall, P-A-L-L, who's one of the world's leading scientists on this. He came and told us the mechanisms of harm for what this radiation is doing to us biologically. We had Theodora Scarato, who's the executive director of the Environmental Health Trust, and her segment of our presentations was to say, hey, look what other countries are already doing, because we are way behind the 8 ball here in the US, where a large chunk of the industry presides. And then we also had Peter Sullivan, and I had found Peter's work through a lecture that I watched online. And Peter has a really interesting background. He, in his younger years, had been a fighter pilot for our government. And so he was up there in the Earth's really high, like gamma rays, way up above the Earth, in a plane that had radar all over the plane, inside the cockpit, where the instrumentation was also communicating back to the terrestrial or the Earth. So Peter had a huge exposure in his work as a fighter pilot. And that radar is where this man-made technology started for warfare. And then we parlayed that into the commercial sector to be Wi-Fi, wireless, 5G, cell towers, cell phones, all of our wearables, everything started for military purposes as radar. So Peter came to tell us that there are definitely things that we can all be doing to keep our spaces safer, and we'll walk you through some of that tonight. But what really intrigued me about Peter's work is that he also started something called Clear Light Foundation, which focuses on the autism community. Peter started getting really sick, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. He started dropping unhealthy amounts of weight. His teeth started getting brittle. And as his sons both came up through the preschool years, both of them were diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So Peter started doing what a lot of families will do. One, they switched over to a clean organic diet, so they're not putting additional body burden on with all the glyphosate and other chemicals that come through conventionally grown foods. Second, they did the heavy metal detox, which is a protocol to pull these toxic metals from our environment out of our organs. And then 3, he said, today, I would advise every family to do the digital detox. And starting with a 12-hour protocol at night where you turn all the wireless off. And we're going to teach you how to still use your technology, but safely. But do that digital detox. And he said, time and again, we see so much improvement, if not recovery. And he taught us that there's something called de novo mutations with autism. It means it didn't come from mom's bloodline. It didn't come from dad's bloodline. It came from somewhere in the environment. So when we start peeling back the onion on these environmental exposures, we see some would call miracles, but in the medical community, we know that when you give the body the ability to heal and to regenerate, we often see really remarkable results. And we don't want to overpromise, because you and I are all very different individually. And we know that genetically, we all have different makeup, so we don't want to overpromise. But time and again, we hear huge improvements in our health when we just learn a little bit, then find the courage to make baby step changes in the right direction. And I will tell you that pediatrician Dr. Toril Gelter out in Walnut Creek, California, she has some wonderful videos out there to help us too. And the one that really stuck with me was that she encouraged this family to do the digital detox, and a boy who had been nonverbal his entire life, after a very short amount of time, reached over and said, "Mom, will you hand me it might have been the scissors or something." He'd never heard his voice outside of the inside of his head. His mother had never heard his voice. And that was simply because they removed the wireless radiation exposure. So the building biologists, those are highly qualified, certified professionals who can come into a home and measure, come up with a report, and teach you how to mitigate. They say they see these miracles all the time. So we want to give you hope. You know, we'll go through the science. It's going to sound pretty bleak. But then we're going to go through the solutions. So just know everything we've broken, we know how to fix. Now, one of the major gaps that we have, when I first got started on this, is we had no way to train our healthcare practitioners on this new field of medicine. So we now have the EMF Medical Conference, and I'll use this as an opportunity to talk you through the alphabet soup in this work. EMF stands for electromagnetic fields. These are the pulsations of microwave radio frequency radiation, or RFR, radio frequency radiation, that's in the microwave spectrum on something called the electromagnetic spectrum. That's what tells us how big the wavelengths are that are coming at us invisibly, and how fast they're coming. What's the frequency and what's the wavelength? That's the electromagnetic spectrum. In a segment of that is microwaves, and that's where all of today's man-made wireless radiation resides, is in the microwave spectrum. So we have EMFs of RFR, electromagnetic fields of radio frequency radiation. And we are so grateful to Elizabeth Kelly, who's a master of public health. She and her colleagues, we all pulled together this EMF medical conference back in 2021. And for 2 years, there were 24.5 continuing medical education credits available. The opportunity to earn credits has expired, but now Libby has taken the entire conference, all of the lectures, all of the questions and answers, all of the expert panels, and put them online on YouTube and on Vimeo at no cost. So you and every one of your healthcare practitioners, your town's firefighters, your emergency responders, your police officers, and all of the professional healthcare folks in our schools, all of the counselors, the therapists, everybody can take this training at no charge. Maybe 20 minutes you put on your calendar for this week. Maybe pick a half-hour lecture, maybe an hour lecture. And one by one, you can go through or jump ahead and pick the ones that interest you most. But you will learn directly from world-leading scientists, doctors, building biologists, nurses, and other experts, including attorneys and advocates. So incredible resource there. And again, we're not here doing this today for our benefit. We're doing it for yours so that you can come up to speed, develop the courage to then start sharing with others in hopes that we can tip the needle into safe technology. So how did my schools become the first in the nation to even have our little blurry sign here that would show us the legal fine print? So anybody who's with us and has an iPhone, I invite you right now to take it out and go into settings. If you have a Google phone or an Android, it's in there as well. All you have to do is look up RF exposure and you'll be able to see the fine print. But I know right where it is on an iPhone. So our friends at the Environmental Health Trust actually have put up a web page called See the Fine Print, and you can go poke around in there to see what other devices, not just the phones, but like the Apple iPad have had a disclaimer in there talking about seizures, blackouts, eye strain, and nobody knows it's there. So from an iPhone, go to your settings and a little ways down, hit general. So settings, then general, then go all the way down to the bottom and hit legal and regulatory. On the next screen that comes up, right at the top, about 4 down, you'll see RF exposure. Hit that. Now we're in the legal fine print that has been in there all along, covering their backside. And it tells us a couple really important things. One, this device was tested at a distance from the body. So if you are holding it while it's radiating with its antennas, you are exceeding the government limits for public radiation exposure. And by the way, as we'll walk you through in a minute, the government never biologically safety tested this before bringing this warfare weapon into the commercial sector. They've now been sued at the Federal Communications Commission. The court ordered them to bring the science in line with their public radiation limits. They didn't give them a deadline though, and it's been 3 years and nobody is coming to protect us. So that's why we teach, so that we can take charge and protect ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities. A little further down in that fine print, they say to reduce your exposure, once you know it's common sense, don't touch something that's radiating. And they tell us to use a hands-free option. I'm going to go ahead and put a pause on my screen share for a moment and give you a little bit of a demonstration. I had a hard time getting my head around this invisible exposure. So I want to give you a live demonstration on what this radiation looks like. And I'm going to show you the detection meter that was recommended at the EMF Medical Conference. It's by Safe Living Technologies, and it's called the Safe and Sound. Oh, here's where it is. Sorry, with that blurry background, it's funny. The Safe and Sound Pro 2, it's about a $400 meter, but some folks are fortunate to buy it outright. Others will go together with their friends and loved ones. Sometimes neighbors will get one. And I'll show you some community resource items in just a minute too. So here in my house, once I stopped circling my tail, because I didn't want to believe any of this, right? But once I started measuring, I went, holy smokes. So one by one, I learned how to fix this. And in my house, I'm in the, where is it? I'm in the green. Everything's opposite. I'm in the green here, and that's the best we can hope for today. Flashing green is really good. In the scientific literature, they want us to be at 10 or less. And the unit of measurement is something called a microwatt per square meter. And here in the US, we talk feet, right? So within 3 feet of air, how much radiation are we being exposed to? Right now in my house, I'm at a 3. And I'm looking at the maximum number here. There are other meters out on the market that are very good too. Some of them show averages in addition to the maximum spike. So if you're standing in your kitchen and there's a lot of space in your kitchen, you don't want the average of what that flame on the stove is going to do to you. You want to know what the flame right in front of you is going to do to you. That's kind of like these microwave spikes that are coming at us. We don't want an average. We want to know what that spike is, because that's what is harming our biological cells. So we want to look at the max on this meter. Again, right now I'm at 3, but I'm going to take my cell phone out of airplane mode. and go into active mode for just a moment to see what happens. So now we've flown off the top of the charts into the extreme. And folks, I'm not even doing anything. This is just one device with multiple antennas coming online and radiating. So I'm gonna, woof, I'm gonna go back into airplane mode and see it'll drop off as the radiation dissipates through the air. And we were at 3 microwatts. We just, we just went up to 3,180,000 microwatts per square meter. Now, 3 million, 3 million could do a lot of harm. In the science, indoors, they want us to be at 10 microwatts or less. And really, they don't want us to really have any radiation around children. But they want us to be at 10 indoors, especially in our sleeping areas. Outdoors, if we could get to even 1,000 or less, so long as we're not standing right under a cell tower, a 5G small cell, or parking ourselves next to a utility smart meter. If we have our sleep sanctuary, our body can probably clean most of that up at night. So our goal is 10 indoors and no more than 1,000 outdoors. So that's what the science is telling us. So I'm going to go back and share my screen again. And again, I want to give encouragement at every turn. So when I figured out that there are meters out there, it took me 3 tries with my town and with my public library, but ultimately we became the first in the nation to pilot putting a radio frequency radiation detection meter on loan in a public library. And now, because I've been sharing this out, I'm hearing from people all over the country saying, we love that idea because our libraries are no longer just for books, they're reinventing themselves, and most libraries now have a library of things. So it's really not a stretch to ask them to put a radio frequency radiation detection meter on loan. We encourage you to get a good one in like the $400 range. Some other libraries have got this GQ 390 something or other. And we compared those side by side, and the littler meter was doing an okay job, but it was missing some of the signals, and we don't want to give people a false sense of security. So if your library can afford out of their budget $400, or if somebody in the community wants to donate that, or if there's a grant fund you can go after, that would be awesome. And we can certainly talk to your librarian and provide resources and stuff so they know that, you know, this isn't just them, this is happening all over. In 2016, that's when I got the acoustimeter on loan. That's this first one. Today, I would suggest the Safe and Sound Pro 2 because it has additional features. You can plug it in, you know, with a cable and hook it up at the wall and then just leave it running to see what happens when people come into your space with their devices, and that way it doesn't eat the battery. And it's got all the acoustics so you can hear these invisible exposures. So it's a really good meter. Both of them are certified by third parties and calibrated, so it's a good scientific tool. If you talk to your library and they don't have funding, or maybe they can only afford $200 out of this year's budget, have them reach out to the Environmental Health Trust. It needs to come from the library as a request, but they have a small grant fund and they can help your library get that meter into circulation. And then we can bring in the training program like we're doing tonight and put word out to the community that this new tool is available. I also want to mention that when we look at people who are using a wired headset that came with their device, remember, one of the properties of wireless radiation is it amplifies around metal. So if you are plugging in a wire at one end of a radiating device and plugging the other end up to your brain, that radiation's going, woohoo, party on, man, we're going right up to the brain. So again, for everything we've broken, we know how to fix it. There are products on the market called hollow tube or air tube headsets. And some of the companies that we know are LessEMF.com, ShieldYourBody.com, TechWellness.com, but it's not too hard to find a hollow tube or an air tube headset. So you get a nice long cord with it so that you can put your device as far away from you as you can because distance is your friend. And then it's got good acoustics for volume control and muting. And then it comes up to these little ferrite beads that break the radiation. And then the acoustics just go up through a hollow tube or an air tube that you can just hook over your ears. And then you've at least created some distance and reduced the radiation. So look for a hollow tube or an air tube headset. And please, folks, think twice about those earbuds. That is a microwave transmitter on each side of your brain, sending signal through your brain and also to communicate to whatever device you probably tucked on your body that it's paired to. So we suggest you really don't do that anymore. Okay. And then one of the best resources in our communities these days are our local cable stations. Mainstream media, we used to have like 50 independent mainstream media outlets, and they've been bought up, bought up, bought up, bought up, and bought up. So now we're left with like 4 to 6 huge conglomerations that own today's mainstream media. And they also own many of these telecommunication companies, tech companies. So we don't see these facts coming out through mainstream media. However, our local cable stations are often very excited when we reach out and say, hey, I have an idea for a program. Can we do some programming around tech safety and air that out in the community? So I'm very grateful for WACA TV in Ashland, Massachusetts. They've done a lot of public service announcements with me over the years. And this 23-minute one may be useful to you in your community. We had a cameraman come to my house and we did a walkthrough to show what today's common exposures might look like. And again, how to address those with suggestions. And then I was brought into the Worcester, Massachusetts cable station for a couple of programs. And the station manager finally just said, Cece, you should have your own show. So twice a month, I drive out to Worcester and go into the studio, and I invite colleagues from around the country, the world, to do 28-minute episodes with me. I think we're up to episode 41 now. And Patty Wood, who was meant to be our co-host tonight, but must have hit a delay, she was my most recent one. And before we're done, I'll drop into the chat this interview that Patty and I did, and you'll hear more about the programs that she has. So please know we have resources available to us if only we ask. And then if you need help, I'm always here to help talk to whomever in your town and bring some credibility and resources. So, as I said, don't take my word on any of this. Learn the science for yourself. And again, I've been studying this for 12 years now. And if I can help you quickly connect the dots and save you some time, by all means, use these slides as a jumping off point, and we'll send them out to you tomorrow. So let's look first at the long-term biological effects of pulsating our cells with invisible microwaves. Child and adult cancers. So for many years, the industry spun it that, oh, you know, there's no mechanism of harm identified in the scientific literature. So, hey, let's keep doing what we're doing. But if we do that, then we are going to see these mounting. I'm just setting a timer real quick so that we can be sure to have time for Q&A for anybody interested. So they, you know, talked about a little bit about cancer, but that used to take 20, 25 years to develop. There was no mechanism of harm identified. So let's just keep doing what we're doing, right? But now we know many different biological mechanisms of harm in the peer-reviewed, published, highly credible scientific body of literature. So child and adult cancers. Here in the United States, in the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, They have a branch called the National Toxicology Program, which is arguably one of the gold standards around the world for toxics research on all sorts of toxicants. The largest study they've ever done is on this issue. They spent 20 years assessing whether cell phones could be harmful. And at the time, 20 years ago, cell phones were the tech of the day. And we had 2G and 3G, or second and third generation of wireless back then. And at the end of the day, after an unprecedented 3-day peer review at the National Institutes of Health, they determined clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, among other harmful findings. Now, clear as evidence is the top of 5 categories they can assign. That should have triggered public policy to protect you and I. But the industry gets a hold of any good study and they'll spin it, oh, that's just one study. You need more than one study to prove anything. Well, right on the heels of our multi-million-dollar study, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy concluded another multi-million-dollar large study on cell tower base stations. So they did the cell tower, we did the cell phone, and guess what? They found the same findings of cancers and DNA damage and more. So we don't need more science. We need an educated public that's going to speak up and demand public policy changes. So DNA damage, we know that's the roadmap to grow a proper anything from a child, a fetus, a plant, a pollinator, or any biome that's out there. If we start messing with the DNA, we are going to have different outcomes than what nature intended. Infertility. So when I started reading the sperm studies, and again, you don't have to look far to find all this rich resource right in front of us that we just never knew existed. Infertility, they exposed human sperm to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA. It slowed the motility of the sperm, and it caused far fewer sperm to be viable, or what they would call in the medical circles, apoptosis or programmed cell death, in just 4 hours of exposure to these radiating antennas. And that was when I found my courage, because I'm a mom, and we had just sent our oldest child off to college with her MacBook, which she, of course, was using right on top of her reproductive organs. And we thought we'd give our younger daughter a leg up when she went into high school. So for Christmas, we gave her a laptop, which, of course, she was using on top of her reproductive organs. And these sperm studies have been, done many times to prove that they are valid. Kaiser Permanente came out with a really good study on women's reproduction, showing higher miscarriage rates when we expose the fetus and the pregnant mom to radiofrequency radiation, and that study was never even challenged. So it goes on and on. We have the science. Neurotoxicity, even pre-COVID-19 pandemic, we were already at epidemic levels of anxiety, depression. We were seeing suicidal ideation like we've never seen before among children and adults. ADD and ADHD. Dr. Hugh Taylor heads up the OB/GYN program at Yale Medical, and he has done the scientific experiment on rodents and saw that when he exposed these pregnant mice to the cell phone radiation, those pups were born and came out developmentally. They were like bouncing off the walls of the cage without a care in the world, without the focus, resembling in large part a child with attention disorders. Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital. She was a Harvard pediatric neurologist who's now retired. But when she was active in the Autism Lab, she saw huge connections between what we know happens scientifically when we continue to expose the brain to this radiation. And then the families in her care, those with autism, would eventually hit a tipping point from all these environmental exposures. And she knows that when you peel back these environmental exposures, including radio frequency radiation, we often see some very significant improvements. Dr. Martin Pall pulled the research on Alzheimer's disease, and where, just like with cancer, it used to hit people in their latter years, in their 90s or 80s. Then we started seeing it in our 70s, our 60s, our 50s, our 40s, our 30s, and even in rare cases in our 20s, we're seeing diagnoses of Alzheimer's. So we cannot continue to pollute the environment of the brain and expect to see what nature intended. And one of the additional mechanisms of harm that Dr. Pal Patcher and colleagues identified is that we have this mechanism called the blood-brain barrier. It's a membrane that encompasses the brain that protects it from toxins. And what they were able to show in the science is that when we constantly jackhammer ourselves with microwaves, it permeates or opens up the blood-brain barrier. So now you've got holes in it. And as the blood is escorting the toxins out of the body, those toxins can now get into our sensitive areas like the brain and the gut, and these barriers are being compromised. So we now have the science. And one of the barriers that we face is, again, mainstream media is captured by industry. So we don't get the facts. And we are so delighted when other well-known groups who are trying to protect our environment get funding to put experts on this topic. And that's what we see has happened at the Environmental Working Group. So perhaps you're already supporting their work. As a mom, I learned about their work with pesticides on our food sources, because every year they put out a Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen list of foods that are grown that you should avoid if they might have a heavy toxic load from commercial growing practices with glyphosate and other chemicals that are dumped into our food stream. And then those that, if you can afford to buy them organically, would be your better choice. So we're so grateful that the Environmental Working Group has a PhD scientist on their staff, and they put out really good fact sheets. So know your audience. If you know parents who already know about the Environmental Working Group, what a beautiful opportunity to open the conversation saying, yeah, and did you see that EWG now has these fact sheets about wireless radiation? This one talks about protecting kids from wireless radiation in school and at home. And these are all well-resourced with the science. This one over here is on the central nervous system and the brain functions. So just know that the resources are here for you. And we also need to be very mindful that children are not just little adults. Their biology is still under construction. Their central nervous system, their DNA, their immune system, it's all still being rapidly developed. And we know that this damages the DNA. We also know, with great thanks to Dr. Om Gandhi and his colleagues and others who have done the modeling on why a child's brain is different with this man-made radiation than yours and mine. You and I have a fully formed adult skull, and our brain has a lesser water content than a child's. So when we put a cell phone up to our head, which we really discourage doing, distance is your friend, use speakerphone or a hollow tube headset. But if you choose to put it right up against your brain, those microwaves are pulsating in about a third of the way into your brain. On a 10-year-old child, these heads are turned sideways. The yellow dot is the ear. It is penetrating a 10-year-old's brain about 3/4 of the way through. And on a 5-year-old's brain with a thinner skull and higher water content, look at this microwave radiation pulsating through that child's almost entire brain. So we need to step up our game and really work from the grassroots up, and then we may see changes at the higher levels. So those were some of the long-term effects for which we now have mechanisms of harm. And we know a bit more about what happens with microwave sickness, or what our Americans for the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, They have long since recognized electromagnetic radiation as harmful, and they use the term electrosensitivity. So just know that there are documents out there with our government that already say this is a legitimate thing that we need to be concerned about. So that can be a good card in your deck. But the good news is, as we go through these short-term effects, after one of these education forums, people often come back and say, wow, I didn't want to know this. I didn't want to believe this because I live on my devices, but my goodness, I recognize some of these symptoms and I decided to take a chance. I took your advice and I created a sleep sanctuary for starters. And when we do that, our body can do cell repair and regeneration at night. And they come back time and again and say, wow, hey, I slept through the night again for the first time in ages. And now, thanks to our scientists, we know what's going on. You and I are light beings. We off of the circadian rhythm, which is the 24-hour clock of light and darkness. And at each hour of that, each one of our organs does something special. Well, in the wee hours of darkness during our sleep cycle, the pineal gland in the brain, and that's about as scientific as I'll get because I'm not a scientist, but the pineal gland in the brain releases melatonin in the wee hours of darkness. Melatonin then goes in and regulates our sleep, but it's also got a big job in helping to escort the day-to-day cell repair toxins out of the body. So what the science is telling us is that our brain cannot differentiate between natural daylight and man-made energy with this invisible light form of radio frequency microwave radiation. So the brain's over there going, hey, when's it going to get dark so I can release the melatonin? And it can't differentiate between what we've created and what nature gave us. So that sure explains a lot and gives people the courage to just start creating that sleep sanctuary. And we'll teach you a little bit about how to do that. Headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines, nosebleeds, ear bleeds, fatigue, chronic fatigue that we just can't seem to get ahead of. And with great thanks to the scientific community again, we now know, and Dr. Magda Havas has some videos that'll show this effect, which is called rouleau formation. And in my little brain, it sounds like Rolos, you know, the little chocolate caramel stack. But it's not too far off of that, actually, because our red blood cells are meant to be free floating and bringing oxygen to all of our systems and organs. What happens when we expose it to an electromagnetic field? First of all, under the microscope, those nice little ovals or rounds of red blood cells start deforming and looking like bottle caps, and then they start magnetizing or glomming together, and then this string of them can't get to where they need to go to bring oxygen to all of our systems and organs. So what the doctors will say is that we are experiencing oxidative stress, and we get this whole ROS or reactive oxygen species thing going on. And as our doctors will tell us that oxidative stress is a precursor to most chronic illnesses. So this is really doing a number on us and our blood. And it can account for pain from unidentified sources. And then we have another mechanism of harm. So just like the birds and the bees have magnetite and other mechanisms in their brains and in their beak to help them navigate through our world and stay synchronized to the Earth's natural electromagnetic field, you and I also have little antennas in the surface of our skin, and that helps us to navigate through our world. Gee, it's getting awfully hot out here, right? So we'll get signals to say, you better go in and protect yourself from dehydration or sunburn, or if it's getting really cold, you better go layer up. So we have all these beautiful little mechanisms built into our skin that the science is showing we are getting overpowered by these chronic pulsations and microwaves hitting our skin. And please know that our skin is not only skin deep, all of our systems are tied to our skin. Our skin sends signaling to all of our organs beneath. So when we mess with the skin, we are also introducing a lot of possibility for harm. People will talk about the hot ear from putting that cell phone up to their face, tingling, numbness, red. So yeah, it's doing a lot. Rashes, burning, flushing, lots that we can improve on when we start creating distance and turning off all the antennas that we're not using at the moment. So it does a number on our skin, and then irregular heartbeats. So depending on your body could be different. It could cause your heartbeat to go really high. It could cause somebody else's to go really low. It could cause, tachycardia, arrhythmia, palpitations, chest pain. Some people have described it as it feels like somebody's sitting on their chest. Blood pressures that go too high or too low. So we're all very different, and this can hit our individual systems very differently. Cognitive impairment, where we just can't think right anymore. And we know that as we age, our cognitive abilities naturally slow in this gradual decline. But this constant bombardment of microwaves is starting to exacerbate that. And sadly, at the EMF medical conference, more than one of the experts said, if we don't get ahead of this, we are going to see more of these societal outbursts like we've seen with the anger and the mass shootings, because biologically this is changing the gray matter and the white matter of the brain, in particular in the areas that allowed us to make good executive function decisions. We are damaging that, and we are seeing the fallout. And as I said, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, epidemic levels, even pre-pandemic. There is a wonderful group of scientists and experts who have recently formed the International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields. The ICBE, EMF, has just put out a very strong statement from the scientific community saying that we are in a crisis of electromagnetic hypersensitivity because we are simply getting overwhelmed and our immune systems cannot keep up. Most people are getting to a tipping point where they are experiencing one or more of these symptoms. So please know that is a new statement that you can take. I'm planning to use it to go to public comment with our local board of health, our select board, our school committee. We all have the opportunity to give a public comment, oftentimes at the beginning of their meetings. And I read it out loud, and it took me about 5 minutes. They may allow you to speak for 5 minutes, or they may cap you off at 2 or 3 minutes. So get a friend to come and you can split it up and read it. But it's a very powerful science-backed statement. So when I was down in the rabbit hole, looking at all of this science, and my eyes are like saucers at this point going, what the heck? Surely somebody's got to have our backs on this. Why don't we know about this? I thought higher ups were protecting us. And then in 2015, Harvard University at their law school Center for Ethics put out this incredible 59-page report called Captured Agency, how the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries that it presumably regulates. So we've all heard a bit about big pharma, big agri, big food. Now we've got big Wi-Fi or big telecom. And notice the graphic that they used on the Captured Agency report is a revolving door. And sadly, that's what a lot of our politics and our federal agencies have become, is a revolving door for industry to put their priorities over public health. So that is free and online. It's highly credible. Feel free to go print that out and look at it and share it with people, because everyone's waiting for someone else to come fix this. And there is no cavalry coming. It's up to you and I, and we have the resources and we know how to do it. But it takes a whole bucket of courage to come out of our comfort zone. But I happen to think our kids and our planet are worth it. So That's why we do what we do, and we'll hold your hand and we'll help you in any way we can. And there are all sorts of resources here for you. When our governments determined clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage back in 2018, that should have triggered public policy. The Food and Drug Administration here in the US commissioned that study, but 20 years ago, we had different, better qualified scientists in the FDA. They're all long since retired or passed away. The gentleman who was in charge of that study as it moved forward up to recent years was Dr. Jeffrey Shuren, who I think just retired from the FDA. But he went over to the FCC and said, we don't really want to believe that study. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. And one might ask, what would ever possess Dr. Shuren to do that? And you don't even have to look very far to discover that he's married to a woman who works for a law firm as a partner who represents big everybody, including big telecom. So nobody's coming. And sadly, it goes all the way up to the World Health Organization, with great thanks to, for example, Dr. Joel Moskowitz at the University of California, Berkeley in the Department of Public Health. This link goes to facts that will show you there are serious conflicts of interest all the way up to the World Health Organization and beyond. Who would know there's two groups at the WHO? One of them was the highly credible, qualified scientists and doctors working on man-made radiation. And the other is an industry-funded group that tends to get a hold of things at the World Health Organization, just like industry has done with our agencies here in the US. So you're welcome to dive in there. They have opened up an investigation now that the National Toxicology Program and the Ramazzini Institute completed the animal studies that were missing and found clear evidence of harm. They reopened up the investigation at the WHO, and it's ongoing right now. But as their reports start coming out, you just look at it and it's stacked with industry people. So we know where the real science is. So we hope one day the WHO will come back to honesty and integrity, but today that is not what we're getting. Okay, so we're going to take a few minutes and talk about the sources of radiation. We've talked about your stuff. We've talked about how to create distance, to turn off the antennas. So for example, in my cell phone, I have a cellular and a data antenna, a Wi-Fi antenna, a Bluetooth antenna, a locator antenna, a hotspot antenna. And for anybody who didn't know any better and upgraded to 5G, you've got another array of antennas in there. And the message is not no technology, it's safe technology. And you can simply go into your settings and one by one identify and turn off all of those antennas. And then you have much safer technology. So reduce your exposure and create as much distance as you can. So we started with cell towers way out in industrial parks, 300 feet up in the air. So they were nowhere near where we lived and worked and studied and worshiped. And then the industry got in and started changing the laws back in 1996, such that with the Telecom Act of 1996, they've come to determine that if you can make it blend in with the environment, then they can kind of put it wherever they want, right? So they started encroaching closer and closer to where we are. And now we see them inside neighborhoods. Now we see them slapped up on the side of the building or up on the buildings, maybe behind a facade, maybe just blaring radiation that you can see up there. So there are a couple of resources for you here. One is at this link, you can go to this link, you can go to antennasearch.com here in the United States, and there's a similar website in Canada where you can type in an address and it'll give a 3-mile radius of how many antennas and how many cell towers, the macro ones, the big ones, are mounted within a 3-mile radius of where you are. I live a little bit further outside of Boston, and so I might have a couple hundred antennas and maybe a few dozen cell towers within that 3-mile radius. But our poor cities, when I put in the State House address in Boston at 24 Beacon Street, I got a return of more than 1,500 cell towers with more than 4,500 of these giant antennas. And mind you, these signals fly, they pulsate for miles. So our cities had become so electropolluted. But feel free to put in your home, your schools, and it'll tell you where all these big antennas are, or most of them. And then when I got into all of this, I got in way over my head and I could not remember where good resources were that I later wanted to share. So being a technical writer, I just created a simple research repository for myself called Understanding EMS, because I didn't understand what electromagnetic fields were. And so I wanted to be able to get back to things quickly. So you'll notice there's no bells and whistles, right? I've got a navigation panel on the side broken down by topic, by category. And then each page is just a list of bullets with the main points highlighted so you can quickly get to the credible science and other resources on this. So feel free to pound around in my research. And this page is on cell towers, and it's critically important that we look at the non-industry funded science because, you know, as part of the big tobacco playbook that the telecom industry is using, if you can create your own science done under conditions that would show no harm and put those studies out to the public, it will perpetuate this false sense of security. So it's critically important to look at the non-industry funded science, you know, follow the dollar, right? And what the non-industry funded science shows us is everything that we just told you. But with the cell phones, there is a curve when we look at the science from an epidemiological standpoint. And I had to go look at that word and figure out what that was, but it means what's actually happening out in society. That's what the epidemiological stuff is. There is a curve of death and neurotoxicity that starts to come down at 500 meters, which is 1,640 feet. It starts to come down. Headaches, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness, anxiety, insomnia, cancers, and more at 1,640 feet. Those statistics don't actually catch up to the normal population till almost double that. So we should be at about 1,000 meters or 3,000 feet from any of these big radiating antennas. And they will tell you that you should not have vulnerable subpopulations anywhere near that for at least a quarter of a mile for children, fetuses, pregnant women, the elderly, or anybody with an existing health compromise, because your body's immune system is already using energy to try and keep you afloat. And that's one of the things, as Dr. Andrew Goldsworthy in the UK taught me, is that we have a finite amount of energy for our immune system. And it's pretty well calibrated to do its normal cell repair and cleanup and keep us humming along in homeostasis or equilibrium. But when we have this constant pulsation of microwaves bombarding us, we often get to a tipping point where we can't do it anymore. And then we tip over and start seeing all this harm. So we really need to get these close range cell towers out. It's a tall order, but at least if we can start where we are and start cleaning up our own environment, that may give our bodies a chance. Now we add in the 5G small cells. So what is 5G? 5G is a marketing term. Every company is calling it something different. Different frequencies all blended together on the electromagnetic spectrum, different lengths of signals. So 5G stands for fifth generation technology. And with great thanks to our friends in Hawaii at Hawaiians for Safe Technology, they've come up with a nice short video, 5 or 6 minutes, to say what 5G is and isn't. That's something you're welcome to post and share with others. But the industry is spinning up 5G as, hey, we are going to have faster downloads, smart cities, super highways. Take a look. Look who's buying up that entertainment industry that's pushing faster download speeds. I don't know about you, but I never woke up and said, hey, I need things to download in 6 seconds instead of 20 seconds. You know, it's ridiculous. They're just spinning up marketing at us that we don't need and that is not actually doing us any good. And 5G doesn't fly into itself. It combines all the longer wavelengths of 3G and 4G that are big enough to penetrate into your building to get to your wireless devices. But in order to carry these massive quantities of data that 5G entails, they need to have many more antennas at close range. So what's their solution? They're going to be putting these little tiny millimeter waves in with all the bigger waves, close range, literally meaning outside your house and mine at bedroom height in the public access way at the curb. They are putting millions of these small cells in right outside our bedrooms so that their little dinky millimeter waves can lock into your device as it's going by on the street with this, taking all this massive energy and beamforming it right into your device. So you know that beam is going through you to get to your device, and think of the harm that it's doing to your biology. So our militaries use this 5G millimeter wave technology for crowd dispersement. They aim it at people to burn their skin to get them to move along. And as you'll notice in many communities, they've targeted our schools. They're using fear mongering to say, hey, if there's a shooter in the building, you're going to want to have your kids have excellent connections. They're going to want to be able to call you. Well, hello. If there's a shooter in the building, you do not want your child on a cell phone. You want your child eye locked on the adult in the room who's giving them safety instructions. When it's all over, the kids can be handed their devices back and they can connect with you. What we've also learned from situations like this is that if the kids do have access to their phones, they don't know what's going on. They're sending all sorts of misinformation that creates all these barriers to getting the facts and the important safety information out to the families. So we don't want cell phones in the kids' hands if there's a crisis going on. So you do not want cell towers on your school property. We saw in Ripon, California, child cancers, teacher cancers, cancers in the surrounding community. And once the cell tower was forced out, there were no new cases. And our poor environment. Again, these little millimeter waves can't go very far and they can't travel through objects. Rain, sleet, snow are going to degrade the signal, as do leaves and branches on our trees. So we have report after report of industry coming in, sometimes literally under the cover of darkness and lopping off the trees so that their signal can go. And this is at the time when our cities are really trying to put tree canopies in for climate change to help cool naturally our cities at this time in history. So 5G is such a raw deal on so many levels. And bless Senator Richard Blumenthal, he stuck his neck out there, and during a congressional hearing with the United States Commerce Committee, he asked these two representatives from industry, please tell us, how much money have you invested in safety testing 5G before it came to market? And in this little 3 or 4 minute clip, with great thanks to our friends from the Environmental Health Trust, you can watch these two industry guys kind of homina, and then ultimately they're made to say, oh, well, gee, we don't really know of any independent studies that were done. And so Senator Blumenthal says, so as far as health and safety is concerned, we're flying blind here. And that's what industry does. They bring these products to market, ask questions later. And then even the techie magazines that report on this are saying 5G is a bad joke. It does not even give us faster signals than the toxins we already had with 4G. So it's just another revenue stream for industry. All right, guys. So thank you for sticking around to listen to all the bad news. But now let's spend a few minutes talking about the good news. When we talk about our personal devices, there's a 3-step protocol that you can consider taking baby steps toward to start protecting yourself, your loved ones, your pets, and your pollinators. Jay Peterson, can I please ask you to mute when you move stuff around? We're starting to get a little interference. Thank you. Okay, so if you were to go look at the back of your router, you will see that there are Ethernet ports. So you've got the internet coming into your premises through a big cable off the street that comes to your home, your office, your schools. Then it plugs in indoors to grab that signal through a router. And then you can plug Ethernet cables into that. So that's the first step. Let's hardwire and use Ethernet cables. You want to look for something, if you may very well still have a box of Ethernet cables kicking around your house somewhere. I did down in my basement. But if you buy a new one, look for one that says shielded. That just means that inside the plastic, there's a liner of aluminum foil that keeps the electric and the magnetic field in the wires. All right. That's another form of man-made energy, those extremely low frequencies, but they can penetrate out into the walls 6 to 8 feet into the room. And for people who get sensitized, sometimes that other form of electromagnetic field at the extremely low level can cause them to suffer symptoms as well. So if you have to buy a new cable, spend the extra couple dollars and get the shielded one if you can. And then most of us have multiple devices in our homes now. So just know there's like an extension cord for electronics. It's called an Ethernet switch. And they're not very big or very expensive. This is that one that's on my slide here, just a little box, plugs into the wall for electricity. And then you plug your main cable to wherever you're going to be using most of your tech into one port. And then just buy little Ethernet cables for all your stuff and start plugging those into the other ports. And you can get switches that are, as big as you need, 20, 30 ports for a classroom. And then many of our devices don't have an Ethernet jack anymore, but who knew? There are little dongles or adapters you can buy for pretty short money. I think for the Chromebooks, it's only like 12 bucks. For the iPhone, the lightning adapter might be $20 or $30, same thing for the MacBook or your laptop or whatever. So hardwiring is the first step. And then the second step is to just go into each device, including your router, and turn off those antennas. You just go into settings and track them all down. For my router, once I hardwired my home, I called up my internet service provider and I said, hey, I know that using cables gives me a much faster signal, far more reliable than just buckshotting things out wirelessly to degrade in the air. A wire is always the better choice. So I said, I'm hardwiring, but that router in my utility closet is still just pulsating a lot of radiation. How do I get rid of that? The guy said, sit down at your computer. And I went, really? He said, yeah. So I ran upstairs, I got on my computer and he just walked me through my account online and took me to wireless settings. And what I saw there was a 2.4 gigahertz antenna and then a 5 gigahertz antenna. And that was with Verizon. When we switched over to Comcast for a better deal, they also had hotspots. So a 2.4 gigahertz hotspot, a 5 gigahertz hotspot. And each one of those was separately radiating my family. So I just learned off, 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 turn it all off one by one, and then hit the apply button. And you'll get a message like, you're killing everybody's wireless connection, right? And I'm like, mm-hmm. And then I waited a minute for it to dissipate and I went down and I measured radio silence. So it can be done, folks, and it just takes a little bit of courage. But measuring is critically important because the industry is forecasting with 5G and the Internet of Things, we're all going to have 200 plus wireless devices in our homes. All that smart technology, the wireless security, the baby monitors, the gaming devices, the mice, the keyboards, the TVs, the appliances, every electronic you buy, they're starting to put these antennas in. So you really need to pay attention and measure. So one other tip here is that most of our cell phones, if you go into the settings, you will find a way to forward your cell phone calls to your landline. So everything that you do on the internet, you can do in airplane mode using these cables. For a telephone call, and I know many people got talked out of their landline. It may be worth it to you to check with your internet service provider to see if you can reinstate that landline service. I called up Verizon and it was only going to be $20 to add it back to the plan. You may already be paying for it, just not using it anymore. So for some, that's short change to have a safe connection that you can forward your cell phone call to. And then when you're on the go, keep it in airplane mode. Everything that's on your device is there for you to use without radiating yourself, your clock, your alarm, your camera. And another handy tip is that if you turn on your phone and you go to your map application and you get your navigation, once you've got it, you can go into airplane mode and it will stop radiating you. On the iPhone, you want to make sure that in your settings, your Bluetooth says off and your Wi-Fi says off and your airplane mode says on. If your Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, simply say not connected or on, still pulsing radiation to try and make a handshake with the cell tower router. You need to just tap it and say off. And then there's a satellite triangulation system that locked onto your phone and it will navigate you to where you're going without using radio frequency radiation. If you take a wrong turn, pull over, go back active for a second and recalculate. But for the most part, in your car, you're in a metal box. Metal amplifies radiation and your head is the highest beacon in that car. So it's a really bad idea to use wireless in a car. So as best you can, turn off all the bells and whistles and try and keep yourself safe. But get a meter. That Safe and Sound Pro 2 was recommended at the EMF Medical Conference, because if you can't measure it, you just never know if there are multiple antennas and maybe you missed one. Okay. So in our classrooms, all of those wireless access points up on the ceiling, on the underbelly, there are 2 Ethernet ports. All you have to do is drop a Ethernet cable down to desk level and then get one of these Ethernet switches and plug in all the devices. You can put, you can run wires and tape them down and make it all safe. This is one our friends at TechSafe Schools have pioneered. They call it the spider. It's got a big red ball that you can plug 8 different Chromebooks or laptops into, and then each of the legs go out with a different cable with the adapter to the device. So we know how to fix this. And at no charge, your schools, with a few clicks of the button, can go into their system and turn down the power output. The industry ships all the equipment at full tilt. And when you actually do the testing, you can bring that power level down 90% or more, and in most cases still have excellent connectivity for the times that you do want to use wireless. We encourage that to be an interim and eventually make your way toward hardwired technology, but excellent solutions at TechSafe Schools. So Dr. Martin Luther King taught us when we have important changes in society, it comes through 3 primary channels. One, the public learns and gets engaged, and that's what we're hoping to inspire today. It goes through the courts and the guilty are held accountable. And ultimately, public policy is often the last thing to catch up when enough of the public really speaks up. So I'm going to whip through a few slides here and give you some of the highlights. We're going to end tonight on one slide, but please know that there's additional information in the slides that are more geared toward the community level and what you can do for your town for the zoning bylaws and other things that you can do at the community level. But we want to give you a quick highlight on what's going on with the courts and public policy. So I mentioned earlier that the FCC has been sued by the Environmental Health Trust, by Children's Health Defense and others, and the courts found the FCC guilty for ignoring the science and told them to bring it back in line to protect us and the environment. They didn't give them a deadline though. So it's been 3 years and the FCC has done nothing to inform us or to protect us. So there's no cavalry coming, but there are a lot of really good people moving the needle in the right direction, but it's going to take too long. So many are sick today. Here in Massachusetts, we've had some groundbreaking work for the first time in the United States after many, 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 many meetings with the local board of health, the planning board, the select, the city council. Finally, a board of health was charged by their town to investigate what happened when Verizon put a cell tower on top of a neighborhood. And they determined there was clear evidence that that cell tower caused 17 children and adults to become so ill that their homes were no longer habitable. In other words, it was not safe to stay in their homes. So all these folks wound up fleeing their homes, living in hotels, couch surfing, living in horrific shacks that were not really fit for human life. And some didn't leave. And we are so sad to report that John passed away recently in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And when they opened him up, he was just riddled with cancers and he didn't have a history of it. Others whose cancers had gone into remission, their cancers returned. Children were vomiting in their beds, skin abnormalities, the headaches, the nosebleeds, the nausea, the dizziness. And this board of health wanted Verizon to come to the table. And there was a commercial property owner who said, we don't care, move the cell tower here. We're nowhere near residencies. But Verizon has proven to be a very dangerous corporate citizen. And instead of coming to the table and working through a solution that was laid at their feet, they went to the court and got an injunction against this board of health, saying that, oh, the FCC's Telecom Act says, hey, you can't tell us what to do. You have no legal rights. Well, the Board of Health believes they do have legal rights. And with great thanks to Children's Health Defense, they sued Verizon and the city of Pittsfield to remove that injunction to let the Board of Health do their jobs. And the judge just came back recently and said, well, I think this needs to go back to the FCC. So here we go again. The FCC is not protecting us, but we believe that they're going to appeal that and we'll see where it's going. But please take heart that just today I got word that Children's Health Defense and Scott McCullough, who's the lead attorney who sued the FCC and gave the oral arguments, they are now putting together a toolkit for you and your communities to start identifying attorneys who know what to do and building out resources for you to connect with them, and they will offer guidance. They offer 10-point guidelines for what you can do for cell towers, for small cells, and for smart meters too. So please know the resources are there for you and your community. Same things, there are lawsuits going on all over the world, and you can dig around deeper into that. And here's that law that we got passed in New Hampshire in 7 months' time to answer these very pointed questions of why our governments are dropping the ball on this. And you can read their groundbreaking commission report with 15 recommendations on what we should be doing to stop using wireless for primary connectivity and transition to fiber optics to and through the premises, where we just pick back up indoors with Ethernet cables. Jay Peterson, please mute yourself. Thank you. And so feel free to look at these resources. They're here for you. Excellent presentations in 20 minutes to walk you through what that law was. But every time we try to come back and enact those 15 recommendations, industry is so powerful with such deep pockets, they keep torpedoing us. But many, many states and up in Canada and around the world are working politically on this. And at the back of my slides, you'll find more on that. So let's spend the next few minutes talking about more of what is going on in the school environment. So I went to an open house at our beautiful new upper elementary school, the David Mendez School here in Ashland, Massachusetts. And I went on a tour with the new principal. And as the tour group moved on, I stayed back with my cell phone in airplane mode, and I used the camera, and I used my Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter, and I talked us through recordings of what we were seeing throughout this tour. When I got out of my car in the parking lot, I took a measurement, and it was green on my meter because we have not allowed cell towers outside or on our schools. That was a really great start. But when I got into the building, I started in the gymnasium with the really tall ceilings for basketballs and stuff, right? And it started flickering out of the green and into the yellow and up into the red. And then when we moved along and went into all the specials rooms like music and art and technology, the library, and then into the classrooms themselves, I discovered that they have put a wireless access point on the ceiling of every single classroom, which is huge overkill. If you go out to my cable show, Tech Safe at Worcester, I interviewed a gentleman from Ireland recently, Alan Brennan, who used to put in wireless systems, so he knows these things inside and out. And he said, that is industry overkill. You could power an entire school with just a few of those routers. We got talked into putting one in every single classroom and hallway. And you will be just, well, go look at those little clips and you'll see what we found. Red, red, red throughout the entire school. And that's what most of our schools look like. And we wonder why the kids and the teachers don't feel so good anymore. Silicon Valley. So the New York Times a few years back did a wonderful 3-part expose on what Silicon Valley executives are doing for their children's education. They are sending their kids to schools like Waldorf and Montessori's, where they don't use technology for teaching. Wired or wireless, they know a child does not properly develop in front of a screen. It's just a tool. It should never replace meaningful interaction with their teachers, with their peers. Kids are tactile. They need to be touching their whole environment, and they need movement, and they need to be outdoors in nature. They do not need to be behind screens. Granted, there are some good applications, but really we need to get back to teaching. And other countries, Finland, Sweden, are removing tech from the classroom and regaining control of the learning environment. And the kids are socially interacting again and learning all those skills. With great thanks to our colleagues, Dr. Holly Grow down in Louisiana is a ophthalmologist, corneal surgeon, and she got together with other doctors and other specialties on lifestyle, obesity, food, all the cardiac, and they got together and unanimously passed a law in Louisiana to come up with some best practices for digital devices, because we've been in the wild, wild west as industry pushed all this in. Now we need to get back to some sanity and bring the pendulum back to the center where we have a balance of using technology responsibly and doing all the other things that properly develop a child. Maryland state level child agency at their Department of Public Health, first to come out with recommendations for hardwiring our schools. Cyprus, during the pandemic, they came out as a country at the country level to tell us to hardwire at home or at least create distance from the routers. And others, the Netherlands, Finland, many are banning cell phones in schools around the US and around the world. Just recently, we worked with the Los Angeles Unified School District and other teachers in California, and I was proud to partner with Patty Wood and Doug Wood from TechSafe Schools, Sydney Cox, who's a retired school teacher, she's very active in California, and others. We all composed a letter to send to the Los Angeles Unified School District, which is one of the largest in the country, to applaud them for putting cell phones away during the school year and encouraging them to make sure when those cell phones are stored, they're done safely so they're not sitting there radiating. And also to use this as an opportunity to learn how to connect the technology that you use in the learning environment safely. So anybody is welcome to use this letter to send to their own administrators and to start the conversation. But I will suggest, as we move into solutions, that you never, ever go it alone. One of my most eye-opening lessons is that we have so many systems in place that kind of make our public servants feel like they're hamstrung, when in fact they're not. But industry got so far ahead, and they've donated a lot to our schools, that our schools feel a bit paralyzed. So my recommendation is that you do not go it alone. You start with yourself by learning, your loved ones, your mature children, and the parents and the guardians and the grandparents of the children that your kids hang out with. We'll give you some tools where you can sit down and start learning together and then form a coalition, because my hard lesson learned was that one voice is easily swept under the rug. So do not go it alone until you're well prepared with others. The U.S. Collaborative for High Performance Schools, they are a green certifying organization. They've already got a module for low EMF best practices to address the wireless radiation as well as the dirty electricity. So great thanks to Dr. Tony Stein and colleagues who got that put in place a number of years ago. And here's TechSafe Schools. I will drop into the chat before we go our half-hour program with Safe Tech at my cable show. And Patty gives us a tour through her TechSafe Schools website. But please know it's there for you, for your schools, and they will send a packet out to your schools if you reach out to them, so you have some credibility opening up the conversation when your team finally speaks to the schools. And they teach everybody how to use the tech safely. There's already K through 12 curriculum from the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition on prevention. And then here's our online training course. We can literally train your entire school on their lunch hour, right? Or during their professional development days. And then our friends at the Environmental Health Trust have a whole bunch of printables you can go poke around, including what to do in colleges and dormitories. Because again, in the entire school environment and home environment, we need that sleep sanctuary. And please never, ever let a child put a radiating device up to their brain, including this new kick on virtual reality. So just know the resources are all teed up and ready for you. Same for other professions. Look at all these incredible resources for our healthcare practitioners. Free medical conference, a website, Physicians for Safe Technology, medical school textbook that just came out this year, nursing textbook that has a chapter on this that you can download at no charge. And then for all of our other professions, we have incredible resources that everybody can share. We'll let you poke around in those later. So next steps, what should we do from here? Keep learning. We will have our October dates announced. See this book, The Anxious Generation. Many of you have may already be aware of it, But Dr. Jonathan Haidt from New York University put this out to basically say in 2012, when we gave our kids a smartphone, we pretty much took their childhood away. And now we're seeing the fallout. It's a really good book to talk about the social and emotional impacts and the detriment to the learning environment. Many of our colleagues are reaching out to him to also make sure he understands the biological effects of the wireless radiation, but he does a really good job, as does Dr. Victoria Dunkley, who has Reset Your Child's Brain with a 4-week protocol to back your kids away from the technology and let the brain heal. And she has a protocol for how to do that, to teach parents how to actively parent around this and make sure everybody in the community of the child knows we're doing a digital detox here. So please don't let your child run down to the neighbor's house and get online. So many incredible resources. And here is a protocol for anybody who has loved ones on the autism spectrum. And then look, PBS even has 2 half-hour episodes. This film, Generation Zapped, is available through many streaming services, including the ones that most of our libraries subscribe to on our behalf that we can access for free, Canopy and Hoopla. This is a great starting point, you guys. Sit down with your loved ones. Get your spouse, your partner, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles. Get everybody to watch this. And this will really set the stage. I can be brought in to do an education session along with this. And the film came out in 2018, but it's still very good today. And I can fill you in like we're doing tonight on what's happened since then. And then this little document over here is just a 4-page handout. And folks with electrical sensitivities are telling me that they print that out and they carry copies with them. So when they open the conversation with somebody, you can quickly look and see what the facts are, just real skimmable. And it's got a good graphic on the back side to show where this is hitting the body so folks can see if their symptoms are lining up. Here's where you can get to my cable show in these little half-hour episodes to help us to keep learning. And then next, here's my idea. So I've been going up and down the chain of command for 10 years now. We have planted really important seeds, and no seed planted is ever wasted, but we're not getting the results that we wanted. Nobody is owning this and protecting you and I and our children. So my heart of hearts is telling me that parents can do this. Guardians can do this. Grandparents can do this. Citizens who are great in the community can do this, but we cannot do it alone. So here's my proposition for you. I have reached out to Rob Metzinger at Safe Living Technologies, and he has offered to give me a bit of a discount on the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter. And I've been very fortunate to get a little grant that's going to help me pay for 10 of these. And I would like to have 10 champions in different towns around the country, around Canada, around Europe. I don't care where from, but I want to pilot 10 champions who will work with us. And let's start educating our communities. We will develop flyers that you can literally go to the schools and stand out at the curb when they're doing open houses, go to the sporting events, go to the theater events, and just start getting something in parents' and guardians' hands. And they will announce on these invitations that we are conducting these forums. Some of us might be able to do them locally at our local libraries or by Zoom or by hybrid, but we're going to get the education out there. And then once we have a good group of informed citizens, and this can be done again through Generation Zap screenings in your own living room. Doesn't have to be fancy, just from the heart to people who care and who we think will care about our collective children. Once we have a good group of citizens. Then we're going to be excited to go to our schools and teach them what we know and teach them all these incredible resources that we have. And each of you who step up to become a champion will have a safe and sound Pro 2 meter to use during this educational process. And then in the end, we want to see it serve the wider community, either donated directly to the schools or to the library if they don't already have one. And you'll still have access because it'll be in your community. What I love about this is the don't do it alone part. So if we can get 10 of us, and I've already got maybe a half a dozen folks lined up right now, we will be each other's support system. We will set up regular meetings on our calendars to meet weekly or biweekly or monthly as we go along, compare notes, what's working, what backfired, what can we do differently, and really just keep ourselves buoyed so that we can try this out. What happens when parents really try to share and protect their communities? So we'll do strategy meetings, and we will pat each other on the back and celebrate with every milestone that we get. So we want to have fun with this. We don't want to be doom and gloom. We want to be excited. We want to move forward, and we want to protect our kids this year. So now that we're already into the first month of school, we know that that's a crazy busy time. Everyone's getting their systems in place, getting their schedules down, getting their home schedules and their after school schedules nailed down. Now this fall, let's start moving on this. So please email me directly if you would like to throw your hat in the ring and become a child safety champion and stand shoulder to shoulder with us to protect our kiddos. All right. So thank you for being with us. Here's how you can reach us. Here's my email address at ma4safetech@gmail.com. You can go to our website and pound around if that's not familiar to you yet. This is it here. And, you know, like Patty and Doug, we all try to be very level-minded with this. We're not big, scary websites. We use lots of open space, you know, graphics that are not scary, because we want it to be inviting, because if we ignite the amygdala, that sends us into fight, flight, or freeze. And we don't want to scare anybody off. We want to be very inviting. So peruse our websites. Tech Safe Schools is a beautiful toolkit for all of us and all of our schools. And then that's where you can email them and ask them to send a packet out to your school district, and then see what resources are there for when we get to that point. And then techsafeschools.org is their website. And then here's the Baby Safe Project that has this beautiful 3-minute video that will protect us and our children in utero. Okay, so I will stop the share and I will take a moment and look at the chat to see if there's anything that we want to address in there. Oh, good on you, Anne Marie. Yeah, we know that other countries are already removing wireless from the classroom. You mentioned that Russia, I will tell you, some of the world's best scientists are in Russia, and they are trying very hard to protect our world. They told, I think it was years ago, I spoke to somebody who had worked for the New Mexico Department of Public Health, and he said, yeah, back in the 60s, the Russian scientists were telling us, please do not allow wireless into consumer products because it's so harmful. But industry overrode once again. So yeah, so it's encouraging. If you go to the Environmental Health Trust, you can see so many countries that are doing right things, and we're inspired by that. So yeah, Maria, it is incredible that this isn't more well known, because I thought, I don't need to do this stuff. Somebody's going to fix it for us. But, well, that's not the case. So we keep doing what we do. And I set my bar very low. If I can plant one seed to help somebody every day, then that's a good day, right? If we get great things like this unbelievable report out of New Hampshire that the European Parliament is actually hailing this as the roadmap to follow, and again, it's in my slides, you find it in my signature on my emails, then we pop the champagne, right? but we're still a long way from getting there. But day by day, we can help each other get there. Can you recommend a router that can be turned off? Maria is asking. Go to Jeremy Johnson's website. It's called emfanalysis.com. Jeremy was a Silicon Valley engineer, and he worked in this field. He and his wife, she's a medical doctor, and they both wound up getting very sick when a bank of smart meters went in on their condo. That's how Jeremy figured this out. So now he spends a lot of his time consulting with people to help them with one-on-one questions. You can order a little 4-question pack online, ask him 4 questions via email, or you can set up a consultation with him to talk to him in person. Very reasonable rates. But if you go to his website, he's so generous with his resources. And if you look at his product recommendations page, there is a router there that he recommends. I think it might be the JRSCO or something like that. It's an eco router that goes into sleep mode when it's not actively being used, and you can still hardwire it and disconnect the antennas. So try that. Another question is, does the adapter, the little Ethernet cable dongle thing, does it allow you to talk on the phone via Ethernet cable? I think if you use something like a WhatsApp, you might be able to do that on your phone. There might be programs out there. Since I don't use a cell phone, I really don't know the answer to that one, but ask around, call up Less EMF, call up, Shield Your Body or Tech Wellness, and ask those guys those questions. Okay. If anybody has a direct answer to that, feel free to pop it in the chat. And let's see what else we got. I love that you guys are putting stuff in the chat here, and that you did it respectfully, so it wasn't a frantic back and forth that was taking away everyone's attention. So thanks for being good citizens in our chat. Yes, Mary has put the JRSCO in the chat. Nancy Vandover, welcome. I love you. Nancy is a doctor. She has many different healing modalities for humans, as well as being a veterinarian. And she's saying that the antennas from her laptop, she had physically removed. And I've actually done that with my television set. There was no way I could disable the Wi-Fi. So I just picked up the TV, put it in my car, drove it down to the local tech guy. I think I paid him like $80, and he opened it up and he pulled out, let me see if I can find it. He just pulled out the antenna, and it was just one little board that was connected to the motherboard in there. And when he pulled it out, let me see, it just looks like a little piece of motherboard in there. So it's not rocket science to fix this. Sorry, guys. I was out at a community fair this weekend, and I don't know where it got to, but it's just a little chip on a board that we're dealing with here. It's not like some big scary thing. Somebody put it in there. We can take it out. So go ahead and look through the chat for other information that Nancy's been giving us there. And she's also recommending a signal tamer, which is a shielded fabric that you can put around something that's radiating. Enough signal may still get through to maintain your connection, but it will reduce the bombardment of radiation by about 90%. So great tips. Thank you so much. Somebody's also asking, I think it was Nancy, what happened with the lawsuit against Verizon with Hank in Idaho. So poor Hank Allen, he worked out by Silicon Valley out in California, and in construction and building trades, I think. And so he was on the go a lot, driving out to the sites that he was building on. And he just started getting so sick. And one day he was driving to work, and he just drove himself out to Stanford Medical because his heart was about to just split out of his chest. Mm-hmm. And he gets in there and finds out that he was being affected by the cell towers on his commute. He found a doctor who understood these environmental exposures, and he learned how to remediate in his home, but this whole community was so electropolluted that his doctor finally said, Hank, you're not going to survive here if you don't get out of here. So what does Hank do? He uproots his lovely wife and 3 daughters and relocates to a farm in Idaho, you know, literally his own private Idaho. And don't you know, industry got in with the abutting property owner, sweet talked him with some revenue stream, and they put a cell tower up like 600 feet or 600 meters. I can't remember which it was, but right next to Hank's house. And, you know, by then he had small farm animals, raising produce, raising bees, and he had beehives on both sides of the house. The side facing that cell tower killed all the bees, killed the beehive. So God bless Children's Health Defense. Once again, they agreed to represent Hank, and they can't represent everybody, and they do everything very strategically with the different circuit courts. They know what might fly in this one, what might not. So they'll take on these cases as test pilots to see what can happen. And in Hank's case, and you can go out to Children's Health Defense through the link in my slides, or just Google them and go to their legal page. But in Hank's case, the court came back and said, well, gee, you know, this was done on private property, so we can't really regulate that. But I think what the appeal is going to be is that it is a trespass to have that private property's radiation coming into Hank's property. So we don't give up. Each lawsuit teaches us something new. Each lawsuit, we get small wins, and we just keep building off of till we get the big wins. So that was that. How can we step up, Maria? Thank you. If you want to work with your community with us, please go ahead and shoot me an email, and then we will start putting some dates on the calendar in the weeks to come. Excellent, Nancy. Yep, share this with the retired school teachers because they know. I gave a screening of Generation Zapped at a library one time, and there was a 30-year career teacher in the lower grades. And she said, it is uncanny to watch these children. She said, even at the end of the day, when they start lining up to get on the bus, these little kids, the boys especially, are standing there twitching in line like this because of their own little digital addiction. They don't even have the controllers for their gaming systems in hand, but they're sitting there just twitching, waiting to get on the school bus to get home. And I thought, good Lord, we have got to get this information out to our communities. And okay, thank you, Nancy. Orem Miller is a building biologist, and we have links in my slides to the Building Biology Institute. And he also has recommendations for different products and routers that you might get a hold of. And Janet, thank you for concurring with Jeremy Johnson being a wonderful resource for us. And also that you can get that router through Electra Health. Oh, good, Shelley. Thank you for the confirmation that WhatsApp is also a good application to use if you are hardwired. Great resources, you guys. You guys rock. All right. Good. Others are using shielding products. Way to go. I know my cell phone measured 3 million and we want to be at 10 or less. She's asking what would my cell phone be if I followed the FCC distance guidelines. It's only 5 millimeters. It would still be the same. I was holding that right there. I mean, yeah, no safe level of man-made radiation. So we simply cannot fool ourselves into thinking we're safe, as the industry has tried to do with all their industry-funded science. So, all right, folks. If anybody would like to raise their hand, we can take some additional live questions. But I thank you for all that in the chat because our video will hopefully be shared out, and you've shared so many great tips with others here with us today. So feel free to unmute, raise a hand, if there's anything else that we can help you with. And we are spot on for 8 o'clock tonight, guys. Thank you so much. Okay, Barb Payne, go ahead and unmute. Here she comes.
I didn't have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's my mouse that puts a hand on there. My apologies.
I have nothing to say because you're so eloquent and you provide the links and the slides and it's just wonderful. Thank you.
And Barb, right back at you, what you do with EPIC, what you do with Canadians for Safe Technology. We are so grateful. Same to you, Shelley, because I know you guys are colleagues up there as well. All right, everybody. Well, listen, I'm going to go watch Dancing with the Stars because it's one of my happy places. And I hope you all have a tech safe night. And we will get the video out. Please share widely and come back next time. We'll keep learning together.
Thank you, Cece.
You're so
Thank
welcome.
you so much.
Thank
You
you,
betcha.
Cece. Very
You're
good to see
welcome,
you.
Ann. Let's catch up sometime soon. It's been too long.
I know.
All right, darling. I'm going to jump off.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Good night.